Trade Union Federation, Cosatu wants Intelligence Inspector General Imtiaz Fazel to be given more powers in the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill to execute his mandate. Parliament is currently processing submissions from stakeholders on what is known as the Spy Bill. Deputy Cosatu Parliamentary Coordinator Tony Ehrenreich joins us now to ventilate their views on the draft legislation. Tony, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. A recommendation from the panel, which the President says he accepts and going to abide by, said that there should be urgently a process put in place to promulgate the regulations governing the functioning of the IGI, urgently institute a formal investigation into the issues surrounding the withdrawal of the IGI's security clearance, establish a task team to review and oversee the implementation of the recommendations of the 2006-2008 reviews insofar as they relate to the IGI. Have these all been completely sidestepped and not catered for in the draft regulation?
Well, good evening. I'm sorry we've got such a bad connection. The only point that we do want to make is that there was a commission put together by the President. Sidney Mafumadi has been tasked to look into the state security agencies and their functioning. And we're really concerned that a lot of the substantive recommendations that he's made has not found its way into the bill. Instead, what we've seen is that there's a lot of process and administrative areas that have been included in the bill. So we remain concerned that we've seen the state capture and the shenanigans around that, whether it was factional battles or attempts to loot the fiscus and the other state-owned enterprises. That was done with in many cases, the acquiescence of the state security agencies or the weakness there to uncover the challenges that we had identified. And as Cosatu, we're really concerned and feel that the further amendments must be made. How we manage that within the tight time frames is a difficult issue. But whilst we are pleased that some of the submissions that Cosatu has made has been taken on board, we think that there are a number of substantive areas that the Portfolio Committee must look at and that we've got to bring those changes in to ensure that we're able to hold the state security agencies to account and to ensure that they're not able to get up to the kind of shenanigans that caused us the problems in the 9 missing years.
So arising from the investigation would have been, of course, a view that says there were illegal orders that would have been issued and those were given to operatives of the intelligence and they carried them out. What can the Office of the IGI do about that?
Well, I think you have to have a level of intervention. So the Office of the IGI, the Inspectorate, has to be able to oversee the developments that are taking place there. But for that to happen, the Office of the Inspectorate must be resourced. So he must have resources, he must have staff, he must have the ability to exercise the oversight that he is granted to his office, but that in effect he does not have the resources to execute. So as Cosatu, we believe that we've got to urgently address that so that the Inspectorate does have the required both authority as well as the institutional backing and support to be able to act effectively in the position of keeping an oversight over the state security agencies, because we can't run the risk of it being used for factional battles. And as we've seen before, the dangers that arise when there are rogue elements within the security establishment and that they can potentially undermine the very trajectory that the state is on in respect of delivering to our people.
Yeah. Broadly speaking, though, there is an institutional culture, there is a morale question, there are systems, there's a capacity to deliver on the mandate. Those are things that would probably need a little bit more than just the Inspector General.
Absolutely. And I think that in some ways what we've done is that we put in place the mechanisms to be able to oversee that. So one of the areas that we've identified is the fact that we've got to now ensure that the training of state security agents, that there's a facility to do that. So a number of administrative steps to overcome some of the weaknesses, make sure that we have proper structures and processes in place. But ultimately, those processes and structures have to be overseen. We have the authority to make sure that they operate effectively. That's what we want to see the Inspectorate's ability to be able to execute, as well as the political leadership making sure that we don't again expose ourselves at the level of state security to the harsh, in many instances, levels of incompetencies that we've seen, but also levels of deep corruption within the institution that must be the custodian of blocking corruption and ensuring that there's ethical conduct across all agencies.
Now, when we look at the pace at which, for example, the state capture recommendations have been implemented and the concerns and the worries about that, do you think there is political will, certainly, to implement these recommendations and to fix the things at SSA?
Well, I certainly think that at the level of the findings that have come out of the Zondo Commission, as a country and as a society, we're much more clear on just how corrupt many of the leadership within government is, how corrupt many of the political leadership is. But along with that, we've also seen how corrupt many of the business leaders is. If we look at the corruption in collusion around bread prices, steel prices, construction of the stadium, there's just a myriad of the elites in our society corrupting the entire society, including somebody like Marcus Jooste, who left pensioners a lot poorer because of the 200-odd billion rand that he misappropriated. So we need to ensure that we have an intelligence and a state security agency that can step into the breach and defend our society against these kind of scalums that masquerade as ethical leaders, whether it's in business or in government or in some instances in the unions or in the NGOs. We've got to clear our country of the scourge of corruption. One of the entities that must help us do that is the state security agencies. But if they themselves are racked with corruption, then we're not going to have the kind of outcomes we want. And that's why we think Parliament now must bring some recommendations to ensure that we change the law, even within the limited confines that we have. But then early in the new administration, we need to have further amendments so that we can ensure that we never run the risk of the levels of corruption that we've seen across our society and in the state security agencies.
Tony Ehrenreich, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and your intervention tonight, Deputy of Cosatu Parliamentary Coordinator there, Tony Ehrenreich.